You can't say, excuse me, Mr. Airplane, but if you can relax doing a 60-degree bank at Mach 2, use that relaxation when you're in front of a group of people. It just doesn't work. It's the way the human brain physiological system is created. So what we do in an Ericksonian approach is we create experiences. It's a basically experiential approach that helps people to stimulate into play the resources that they have that have been previously dormant. So rather than Freud, who was analyzing the conflicts that you had with your mother and your father in your unconscious, this is a much more practical approach, much more being a tour guide rather than archaeologist. How do you help people to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible? And hypnosis is a possible use, but tasks, assignments, poetry, things that inspire people, move people, things that are catalysts that stimulate into play and help to recrystallize the strengths and the abilities that people have, especially done in the context of where they live, where they work, where their family is. So for me, bringing in family members is not to castigate them for problems that they've created, but I know that the family is the best context, and when you get the family working together like a laser, and they're really focused,
right,
then the family turns out to be a very powerful agent for change. And I believe that people are basically health-seeking, and that giving the opportunity, they will, for the most part, be health-seeking.
Right.
But also in this day and age, we have the trauma of divorce, the trauma of family and child abuse, trauma that's caused by habits, smoking, alcoholism.
Right.
And if you have an addiction like alcoholism or an eating addiction, trying to deal with that addiction alone, that's asking too much of any human being. They need somebody who's trained in order to be able to help them. And certainly AA, self-help groups, would be part of a treatment approach. It's not that there's just one way to get to home, but maybe a therapist in that sense can captain a team, the family, the social service agencies, the resources that are available in the community, and help the person to know, to realize that change is possible.
Right. I can remember Carl Whitaker holding off family sessions. People would fly in from all over the country or out of the country to attend a session, and if every member of the family wasn't there, he would not have the session. That's how, it was so important to include the whole family. But I want to get back to Milton Erickson for just a minute here. You're describing the theory of Milton's work. Could you give us an example of, he's almost considered a magician in terms of his therapeutic intervention with certain cases. Would you mind talking about that for a moment?
Yes, I can give you a case a little bit.
Because most people have never heard of Milton Erickson or how do you describe what he does? Or I think an example would be good.
Sure. Well, there were many facets of Erickson's work. So some facets are called strategic therapy, which is like hypnotherapy without a trance. Some facets using direct hypnosis. I'll give you a case. It's a little long, but I'll give you a case that involves the use of strategic therapy without the necessity of applying hypnosis. The idea is from social psychology. You can place people in contexts where they can begin to behave differently, and by virtue of having these new reference experiences, they begin to change the identity. So a problem was that a woman came to Erickson, and a couple came to Erickson. The woman was the presenting problem, her alcoholism, and she had a wicked alcohol problem. All weekend long, she worked in the garden, and she took drinks, swigs, from a hidden bottle of whiskey. Now the husband criticized, confronted, and counseled the wife, explained that her little hobby was bad for herself and bad for the relationship. But the wife continued with impunity to do her little hobby. Now in the interview, Erickson found out that the wife had a complaint because the husband had a little hobby. And the husband's little hobby was that all weekend long, according to the wife, he sat in the same chair in the living room, reading, according to the wife, dusty old books, dusty old magazines, and dusty old newspapers. Now, the wife counseled, criticized, and confronted the husband, explaining that his little hobby was bad for the relationship and bad for himself. But the husband continued to do that with impunity. In the initial interview, Erickson found out that the couple had a camping bus, but the camping bus collected dust. They hadn't used it in years. Erickson also found out that the couple had an aversion to fishing. They hated fishing. Now, with that information, maybe a traditional psychotherapist would analyze the case. They would talk about how the couple was bringing their adolescent rebellion into their present marriage. The therapist might talk about the patterns of the relationship. This couple is having a hostile, dependent relationship. May talk about the fact that this couple is having an escalating symmetric problem. And the therapist might have very good and interesting and very astute ways of observing the interpersonal dynamic, and explaining to people and educating people how could they be more assertive, how could they change their behavior. That's not in the approach of Erickson, which is often called an uncommon therapy, but it's uncommon common sense. So different than what you might be able to do in today's ethical environment, what Erickson did is he told the woman to go out and buy a bottle of whiskey. Now, I couldn't do that in today's ethical environment, but this was done in a time when Erickson could do it. So she was to buy a bottle of whiskey, and she was to hide the bottle of whiskey in the house. The husband had 1 hour to find the hidden bottle of whiskey when he came home. If he didn't, she could drink with impunity in the house. Now, the wife loved this assignment, and she found a place to hide a bottle of whiskey that no man would ever find in 1 hour. But after a few days of doing it, she got tired of it. Somehow it wasn't fun anymore, this game of hiding. And then they came back to Erickson for the next session. In the next session, Erickson counsels them, confronts them, criticizes them, and sharply says to them, "Go fishing." They said, "Well, you're crazy. We told you we hate fishing." He said, "You must go fishing." Then what are you talking about? We hate fishing. You will go fishing. We're not going fishing. Go fishing. Why? Well, Erickson explained, it's the only proper therapy for you. Husband, if you're in a little boat in the middle of the lake, there's no place for dusty old books, dusty old magazines, and dusty old newspapers. Wife, if you're in a little boat in the middle of the lake, there's no place to hide a bottle of whiskey. This is the only proper therapy for you. Go fishing. What does the couple do? Well, the couple does what they know. They act with impunity. They go camping. They dust off their camping bus. They refuse to go fishing. They go out and go camping. In the process of going camping, they start to establish a new little hobby, which is exploring Arizona. They reestablish an old hobby, which is being interested in each other and spending time together. In the process of doing that, he voluntarily gives up drinking. She voluntarily gives up drinking. He voluntarily gives up his little hobby. Now, this is called uncommon therapy. But this is just common sense. It's just setting up conditions where people discover resources that have been previously dormant. They discover possibilities in their life that have been previously dormant. If you want me to go on another case.
Yeah, well, for some reason when you were talking,
so happy we alive, we together can survive.
We are just a shell of another self, of another self. Who His polity is to live and learn, yet let it be. The clothes we get trapped in.